Okay, I show it's 2 minutes after 4. We'll go ahead and get started on this month's meeting of the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission. First order of business is the call to order. I'm sorry. Tracy, could you give us the call to order? I'm sorry, the first order of business, a roll call.
Here.
Grooms.
Here.
Moulton. Here. Stoltz.
Here.
Banks.
Here.
Vice Chairman Derryberry.
Here.
Chairman Sturtevant.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item is an invocation. We have the Assistant Pastor John Stone from the Lancaster Baptist Church to lead us in that. If everybody please rise.
I want you to know on behalf of our pastor, Pastor Paul Chappell, who is on vacation, who would love to be here, we are so grateful to be a part of this town, and we love the things that are happening here. They have had such a positive impact for the community. So we are praying that God will give you guys wisdom today to help protect the area, to make it a safe place, to bring up families and children, and we appreciate what you guys are doing here. And so we pray the Lord to bless you today. Father, would you be with these people, these men and women who are called to bring order and structure to our city. I thank you for the passion that you have given them to sacrifice, to be here, to give their time. And I pray, Lord, that you would allow them to understand the issues well, and may they rule with wisdom. Now, I know that today there may be a possibility that there would be some divisiveness or maybe some questions about issues. Would you allow everything that's said here and done here today to be done in a God-honoring and in a proper way? Thank you for these individuals. Now guide them as they are about the business that affects so many of us. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. You guys will excuse me. I do have an appointment, but we're so grateful for what you guys are doing. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If everybody could remain standing, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item is public business from the floor. This is the time for citizens who would like to address the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission on any agendized item. Please complete a speaker card and identify the agenda item you would like to discuss. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Do we have any speakers today?
For each item.
Oh, okay.
So I will discuss give the presentation on the graffiti, and then we will hear public comment.
Just clarification. Are we supposed to take the citizens' input first, or have the agenda item heard first?
The agenda item is heard first, and then they speak afterwards.
I see. Okay.
The presentation is on... Oh, excuse me, we have to have approval of the minutes.
Okay, before we handle the new business, we'll handle the consent calendar. There's only one item on it, and that's the approval of the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission meeting minutes of May 3rd, 2011. I'd ask commissioners if there are any changes, additions, or deletions to be made.
I'll move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Derryberry.
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Banks. Please vote. Okay, the motion carries 7-0. Okay, moving on to new business. The first item is a presentation of the City of Lancaster efforts to remove graffiti from public and private property. Elizabeth?
The graffiti ordinance was adopted in 1995, and It's a basically straightforward, simple document. It allows the appropriation of funds by the city to eliminate graffiti, the use of city funds to repair damages caused by graffiti, liability for costs incurred in graffiti removal, and nuisance abatement liens. The importance of these few items is that if the graffiti is on private property, we need to get a authorization, which we have an authorization letter from the owner to remove graffiti. In the event we don't receive that letter, we have a process that we follow pursuant to the Lancaster Municipal Code. In the event we have to do the graffiti abatement, we do have a process for nuisance abatement lien to get our money back for the removal of graffiti. We also have the ability to do rewards on graffiti if the city goes in that direction. And it's a very simple ordinance. I'm going to reverse it to where I'll talk about code enforcement, and then Richard can talk about the public works portion. Code enforcement only enforces graffiti on private property, not on public property. So a lot of the graffiti that you see, a lot of the graffiti that's called in is generally on public property, not private. Graffiti is one of those things that has to be taken care of instantly. So there are times that it is on private property that we do have Public Works remove it, but we do get our money back through the process that we have pursuant to the Lancaster Municipal Code. Most of the time, the graffiti issues that we do have are on commercial and retail. A lot of times it may be the manner in which the business has their ladders or things like that, and we're able to work with them to eliminate the problem of the graffiti being put on the businesses. Code enforcement handles the real estate signs and other for sale signs for graffiti. And then generally, if you have graffiti on a personal residence, 9 times out of 10 there's other issues with the property, so it gets wrapped into a code enforcement case. Public Works is the one that deals primarily with all of the graffiti that you see throughout the community.
Except for in the parks departments. There we go. Except for in the parks departments, the parks staff will abate graffiti on their own, on city-owned parks, unless it's a large tag, wherein then we'll have bigger equipment to be able to abate that. But most of the pen work or the smaller tags are abated that way. Going back to one thing that Liz said is with the private property, obviously there's a release of liability that has to be received before city staff can go onto private property. There are exceptions for hate speech, vulgarity, and we'll move on immediately to abate those on private property. But it definitely is one of our most difficult scenarios, especially with all the bank-owned property, of finding a property owner to get that graffiti abated. Commercial properties, obviously, we try to work with. There tends to be those businesses, those enterprises that get tagged more than others, and a lot of times there's only a manager on site, say the Save-On. He's not necessarily the owner of record, and we try to work with those guys to have release of liability on file so that as those situations arise, we can act more quickly. We've worked extensively with the specifications for landscape development. As Liz stated, a lot of the graffiti tends to be on the arterials. Obviously, the intent of graffiti is to make it visible. And, when you're driving on arterials, you have a windshield view, so, they don't tend to tag places that people don't see. So they tend to be on our arterial walls, our LMD walls. We've tried to put vines and taller plants against the back of the walls and bring the landscape forward. That's been successful in some locations where that plant material has thrived, and then other areas it's hard. We did make a concerted effort about 4 years ago. Our complete graffiti abatement was paint over. And for those of you that have been here in Lancaster for a while, it was a quilt patchwork effect that didn't look very good. We kind of drew a line in the sand. We've been working with a company called Urban Restoration. They have a product that's a solvent that'll take graffiti off block, split face, decorative block. And so now on these newer LMDs, I think the straw that broke the camel's back was when Lancaster High School first got built, and that track went across the street. There was just tags up and down it, and it was a brand new split face decorative block wall, and we were painting it, which for any of you guys that are for this board that understands painting outside, it's a maintenance nightmare. You end up having to go back and redo it over and over and over again. So, but this has worked well. This is extremely costly and it's time consuming, but we're able to keep new block, and then those walls that have been painted in the past continue to be painted. 2 years ago, we got a specialized graffiti abatement truck with a spectrometer and a color match wheel. So on those commercial properties that have gray stucco or blue stucco or orange stucco, we can color match and then still do paint over and not waste expensive chemical on stucco. You know, most stucco will overpaint, but with the split face and the block, it's very, very difficult because there's a texture to the block and the paint hides that texture. So that's really our abatement issues. We've got anywhere from 2 to 4 people covering 99 square miles, 24/7, basically. I mean, graffiti has spiked, school's out. We have a 24-hour mandate, but to be honest with you guys, there's no way to meet it. I can't meet it. Not with the staff that I have and not with the amount of graffiti. It ebbs and flows. You know, Easter break, Christmas vacation, you'll see it just go through the roof. We'll take 200 graffiti abatement calls on a Monday morning and have carryover throughout the week, and by Friday we'll have hit all our service requests, but then you start over on Monday morning. So it's a challenge.
Lee's going to speak on trying to resolve the problem overall by making it more a punishment against those that keep doing the graffiti so that we can try and deter graffiti, and Lee's going to speak about that.
First thing that we do is part of our responsibility in our office is we track the graffiti cases that the city deals with, both from the parks and from Richard's crew at Public Works. We track the police reports. We follow up with probation. Marlene Navarro handles, Marlene, put your hand. She tracks the cases, and we work that through the process as it relates with the Sheriff's Department's investigation, how the cases are filed, what they take every month over to the court, and what the status of those cases are to be updated all the time. Now, some things we're looking at, because historically what would happen was the report would be submitted to Detective Bureau. The detective would investigate it, collaborating with schools and, you know, the security people at schools and neighborhood watch groups and whoever's out there in the public entity that identifies who these people are. They would work those and file those cases collectively on each individual, because it's rare do you get one incident tied to one individual. Usually, you know, part of that is getting their message out, so it's usually multiple cases. Historically, what had occurred for years is that cities would come to court and testify on the actuary cost of removal of graffiti, and it became very cumbersome in the court. So about 20 years ago, the courts came up with an idea to put together a cost model, which was basically an accepted practice of a general rate of cost for a municipality to clean up each incident of graffiti. Right now it's about, what, $430, Richard, something like that, which is way under, just so you know. Okay, we're currently looking at reassessing and reevaluating that cost model. And then what would happen is you could assess that cost model to each individual incident of graffiti, and you can see how quickly that could be substantial, those dollar amounts. Then what happened was, is as the case was filed and the Department of Probation gets involved, especially with juveniles, does a predisposition investigation and makes a determination on recommendations to the court. Well, what was happening to us is we'd have someone with $45,000 or $50,000, $60,000 worth of graffiti vandalism. The case would be filed. They'd adjudicate the case, and they'd submit to the fact that they were responsible for that amount, and probation would give them a repayment agreement of $10 a month. Okay? $10 a month, and as long as you can maintain anyone on summary probation, is 5 years. So you can see where the issue lies. After 5 years, you have nothing to hold over that individual's head to make the city whole again. So what we've really done now is work, especially the last 6-7 months, work with the courts, with the presiding judge, with the district attorney's office in both the juvenile and adult courts, is to coming up with more of a feasible model on how we want to approach these cases. And what we've done, we actually have some judges that are making people pay us back within a matter of 45 to 60 days, okay, that they have to come, or they sentence them to significant time in jail or prison. The other aspect we're looking at is coming up with some administrative process to deal with parental supervision and responsibility as it's related to these type of cases. And I can tell you it's an interesting phenomenon to look at it because, as Richard said, there's some ebb and tide in graffiti, but if you look at the totality of it, there's a case right now that's being filed, and it's here in the Antelope Valley, and it involves both cities with one group that's done about $1.3 million worth of graffiti vandalism in the last year in the community. So just based on that lower dollar amount per cost model. So what we're doing is we're trying to actively work with our courts and probation right now to modify how we manage these cases through the court to make them more prudent. A recent issue we were having that Steve Lehrman brought to our attention from the Detective Bureau was, unless the person pleaded an admission of guilt on each item of graffiti or there was an eyewitness, they weren't filing the cases. And obviously you can see where that goes. Okay, so it doesn't take long for the word to get out that, hey, if you just don't plead out to it, then they can't charge you with it because the DA won't file it. So we've gotten that fixed now, okay, as we can tie, and obviously using our criminal analysts at the crime lab from the Sheriff's Department and identify and tie that individual to that specific moniker, we're filing those cases. So we're seeing some positive results of all the things that we're working collectively to do. The other thing is we renewed our contract with Graffiti Tracker. That's something that the Public Works and the Parks folks can download those photographs, that graffiti, and it's tracked. So when for a case tracking and filing process, it's it works very well. Especially if we have someone that comes from outside the area and commits some graffiti vandalism here locally, we can tie that back because that system is utilized all throughout Los Angeles County. So it becomes an effective way to filing a number of counts against an individual that's committing those crimes.
We have a speaker, David G.
Wow. It's very interesting. So you're going to charge people with crimes. It's crazy. And then you're going to punish the people that have private property. You're going to make them pay, so they have to pay, and then they have to pay through jail time. It's kind of crazy. And then graffiti. I know somebody that was arrested for graffiti, and he has his house bombarded by sheriffs, over like, I think 5 squad cars, pounding on the door and stuff. So those kind of situations I want to see handled the right way. $1.2 million, that's a lot of paint, I wonder if the people that were tagging can buy $1.2 million worth of paint since they did that much damage. Graffiti, that's crazy. I never thought that graffiti hurted anybody. Sometimes they just send a message, but you guys are doing a lot of code enforcement. I wouldn't see why not. You guys can't pay for the graffiti anyways. You're telling people how to live with all these code enforcement violations that people are getting. So I wouldn't see why, how you couldn't get the money to afford $435 when people are getting charged $400 for every code violation, I hear, So you're just going to punish more people. That's all I see. That's all I hear is just you guys are just going to punish more people. You're going to try to find out how you can tie them into as many different crimes as you can. What if that's, used for, what if they don't use that right, that system, and somebody gets tied into all this different graffiti? You know, they have tagging crews. You know, they have multiple people that go out and they tag the same thing. You know, and you're going to tie one individual. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I know these, I grew up in that generation. I know people that tag, you know. It's not just one person, it's a whole group of people. And sometimes their messages are important. You just got to pay attention to them, you know, and then go relate to the community why they're doing it. Instead of trying to punish them and throw them in jail, you know, why don't you make a wall that everybody can go tag on, you know, instead of throw them in jail for a non-violent offense, you know. So I don't think that people should get punished for getting their property tagged on and they have to pay it, because I could see that being abused every day, I bet. So, I don't know. I filled out every speaker card, so I'm going to be speaking on everything, and I look forward to it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other speakers on that topic? Okay, I'll open a comment period to commissioners.
Lee, on the restitution, that's the criminal restitution, right?
Correct.
Is the city doing anything through civil restitution at all at this point?
That's discussion. That's an avenue that I'm currently working with at the station and talking with the court. Okay, a process that we could develop to bring forward to the city for that would be a feasibility issue, right, on how to manage that civilly, and then that would create a whole nother tracking process and as it relates. So really not knowing the full impact of how that would work and how it would work in coordination with our criminal cases.
Well, see, I do have a little bit of experience with this, is that in regards to the criminal, there is a cap on it, like you discussed. Civilly, I mean, specifically to juveniles, there are specific code sections that will require the parents to pay that back.
Right.
You know, I have a variety of clients, commercial, industrial clients, that, you know, when a juvenile is convicted of that, the code section is very clear. So you can get a lot more through the civil course, although it is considerably more expensive, and it's also futile if the individuals don't have any money to pay to begin with. But
yeah, there's been some things that have been done recently, like the State Franchise Tax Board, for example. You can manage things through them for collection. There's, you know, percentages. Same thing with Social Security. There's a lot of different avenues now that are being opened up as it relates to programs out there to attach those issues. Again, it just becomes the process, going and presenting, you know,
and the
court.
expense.
Pardon me?
And the expense.
Exactly. So it's just a feasibility issue based on the number of cases you have.
Lee, what is the average age? I mean, how many graffiti people out there are over the age of 18? Is there a lot? Or
Yes. The majority, I would say the larger majority is juvenile related, but there is some that transition from juveniles into adulthood, and that becomes a whole other issue as these cases go on, especially if you have a case that goes over a long period of time with a substantial amount of incidents, and then you get into, that's a whole other issue that becomes from one court to the next on how you split those cases or how they're managed. Again, it's just, you know, every court and jurisdictions, and including different courts, have a different view as it relates to graffiti vandalism. So, you know, we're looking for continuity and consistency between the courts. Again, you know, a $10 a month restitution agreement is not feasible. When I talk to the individuals we're managing, and by the way, that whole department's been revamped by Los Angeles County Probation, so it no longer exists as it was 6 months ago. But at that time, they actually worked collectively with the individual who committed the crime to see what they could afford a month. Okay, and that really was not. It was ridiculous. Okay, because the collection issue is not happening. So now by tracking those cases, the idea being we're supposed to notify them it's a condition of their probation, and they need to pay by a certain date. And we have some other judges now, because they keep seeing the same person over and over again in their court, and that they're not modifying their behavior, there's some serious sentences being dealt out as it relates to that, punitive issues.
A question, I'm not sure who this would go to, but in the public right-of-way, Caltrans along the freeway exits and so forth, I've noticed some graffiti there. What's the process there, and who has to take care of that? Is that strictly Caltrans, or how's that work?
Yes, that would be Caltrans. The city's responsible only for that graffiti in the public right-of-way within the, city limits of Lancaster, that being dedicated right-of-way to the state highway. If we'd be more than willing to take those requests on our hotline, and then we would just pass. If we were to receive them on our hotline, we would just pass them on to Caltrans.
What has been Caltrans' response to complaints?
I'll plead the fifth on that. They're not as responsive as we are. I don't want to say that they don't respond, but honestly, after I've reported it, I really am not paying that close attention to give you a good idea of what their response time is.
I can answer. I used to work with Caltrans. It is not a priority for Caltrans. They do it with their own crews. Usually the cleanup is part of their maintenance efforts, or they used to. We do have a transportation meeting with Supervisor Antonovich tomorrow, so we'd be happy to bring it up as a concern of this commission. The Caltrans head of District 7 will be there as well, too. So we'd be happy to bring it up as a concern. Don't know how far that's going to go.
My experience, it's always helpful to remind Caltrans.
I'm not sure who to address this question to. Perhaps Richard. From the point of receiving a citizen's notification that graffiti is located in their neighborhood to its removal, what are we looking at in terms of average response time on that? And I know it probably varies as the peaks and valleys of graffiti take place.
Yeah, I would like to say that the majority of the time it's within 24 hours, but realistically about 48.
Okay.
Within 2 working days, we'll have addressed it.
Okay. And the other question I had is, I was wondering if graffiti, the amount of graffiti today is more or less or the same as, say, 5 years ago?
It's more. And I think it's a direct correlation with population. It just truly is. I mean, I just think we have more people. Not to say that the efforts that have been put forward by code enforcement, by this commission, by other functions within the city are not working. I mean, it could be a lot more than what it is, but yes, it has increased. Okay. I wasn't quite sure what my role was here today, or I would have brought some qualitative data, but I believe that we abated, our graffiti abatement in the first 6 months of 2011 went up by 185% from 2010.
Are there cameras that are installed ever? I mean, in other words, if you get a corridor that has a large amount of graffiti that's consistent, does the city do anything along the lines of putting up a camera to identify the artist?
I don't believe we ever have done that. We do have security cameras at our park and rides, but it wasn't for the intent of identifying taggers. And
do you have certain corridors that are constantly hit, that you find yourself visiting on a monthly or weekly basis?
Not really. It's pretty widespread. The graffiti tracker, as mentioned by Lee, that we contract with, each tag is shot with a GPS-enabled camera. And it's quite interesting. You can take for the calendar year and pull up the map, and you'll get 10,000 red dots all over the map, and it pretty much shows you it's not localized in any specific neighborhood. It is pretty much widespread.
As hotspots do occur, whether we have two or more incidents, the Sheriff's Department has set some operational plans up specifically identified to just exactly what Richard talked about as the rise that we've had this year. So we have a monthly ComStat meeting where we meet with representatives from the Sheriff's Department and their command staff and talk about what the issues are, most pressing issues. This has become a focus just because, quite frankly, lots of other issues we've had with crime have gone down significantly in the last 3 years. So the priority now is we're able to get to things like this and prioritize this issue. We've also had some recent things that contributed to that with the release of several individuals out of camp who were pretty notorious taggers in the community who got active immediately upon their release. Okay? And a number of them have been put back in custody, okay, and back going through the process again as well. So that there has been some issues related to that, and it just so happened that sometimes, as the gentleman mentioned earlier, that these guys work in tagging crews. You know, we identify who those members of those crews are, and it isn't just one individual. Each individual might have a specific moniker they use, and then the crew's tagging identifier. Okay, so they'll be related to that crew, and as the Sheriff's Department or other law enforcement agencies work that crew, they identify those individuals' members and tie all of them to those incidents. So we had some rather large tagging crews, as we say, that were recently released, okay, within 2011. And again,
And they were juveniles?
and so as working upon that information immediately based on their release, where they resided, we started seeing incidents with the same individuals who actually changed their tagging crew name but used their same moniker. Okay?
Right, and that group is one that hits single-family residences, whether they are occupied or not. So when they got out, we had a huge increase within neighborhoods of them hitting houses.
And then you have the people pay for the residents pay for that too?
Do any other commissioners have comments or questions? Okay, I'd really like to thank Elizabeth and Richard and Lee for giving us a very good overview of graffiti here in the city of Lancaster. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the overview of the city of Lancaster's group home ordinance and implementation. Elizabeth Brubaker.
In 2007, the City Council adopted a group home business license for the protection of all citizens' health and safety in the city of Lancaster. There has been, well, let me go back. We also, in terms of code enforcement, approved a standard operating procedures so that we have an ordinance. We also have staff that consistently enforces it in the same manner. One of the confusions that appears to happen is what is a group home? A group home is a home that is rented where the individuals have a disability. So, and a disability can be alcohol. So sober living units and other types of homes where the individuals that reside at that home have a disability is a group home. Where the confusion comes up about this 6 or fewer or 6 or more has to do with what is a rental. And if they don't have a disability, it is considered a rental property and goes under the rental business license that also was approved in 2007. When the code enforcement officers go out and inspect the group homes, they're inspecting it under the rental business licensing ordinance. So they're looking for items that don't meet building code and, of course, those that don't meet the Lancaster Municipal Code. What they frequently find on some of the group homes, and this is where they're not group homes and their licenses are either revoked, suspended, or denied, is that you cannot operate in a zone of which you cannot operate in, and you cannot take the structure and change it from a residential into a multifamily structure, which is what we run into. So those that are licensed through the state do not pay to have a business license. They're exempt because they are a nonprofit and licensed through the state, but they're still inspected by the city of Lancaster, and they're also inspected by the state. So generally, those that are state licensed do not present problems for the city. It's generally those that do not and are not inspected by the state. Basically, it is a licensing, so most of the information that we get is through business licensing so that we know who resides in the homes and what they do. How we initially started out was inspecting those group homes that had obtained business licenses before, and then we have actually found group homes through the rental inspection licensing program that we have, and we've discovered them through complaints from citizens. So far, we have so far, let me see, if I was going to give which ones have been denied. We have a total state licensed of 116 homes in the city of Lancaster. We've denied 23. And right now what we're doing is a focused inspection of probably about 30 that we suspect are group homes, but we don't know. So that's basically the overview of the group home license. And I'm sure you might have some questions about it based on things that you know about your neighborhood or what you deal with, or...
The question I would like to propose...
Let's see, I think before we take the question, we'll go ahead and have the public comment.
David G.?
Thank you. I'll waive that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, Howard.
It's quite all right. The question I have is, of the 116 homes, what percentages, or even if you carry this kind of data, but what percentages are attributed to some kind of drug or alcohol-related abuse as opposed to a physical, or do you have group homes that, I'm assuming you have group homes that have physical disability as well?
We don't keep track of the disabilities that they have. We could, going through the applications, but it's not something that we look at.
Liz, where does the funding come from? I mean, to support these things? Does the residents come up with like a rent and that in
What supports
some of the non-licensed ones that you run into?
Well, they're generally getting money for having this type of disability, and the property owner is taking a portion of that money for rent. The difficulty with these types of homes is that sometimes the amount of money they're paying for rent doesn't allow them the funds to seek the social services that they need to get to where they need to be to get well again. That's one of the problems, but they get it primarily from having that disability.
Actually, that kind of raises in my mind the question, are the group home, is one of the state of California requirements for a group home to be physically located so that those services are accessible to the occupants of the group home?
Not that I've seen.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
And then also, just as with the last item, has there been a dramatic increase, or is it about the same number as the last, say, 5 years ago?
When when the City Council adopted the group home ordinance, we saw a decrease in those types of facilities because they couldn't obtain the license to run the group home based on our requirements. So that also led us to believe then, are they not coming in because they can't meet the requirements? And that's where we pick a lot of them up through the rental inspection program. But because we do have the business licensing, some of them left. Also, they have to go through planning first before they would just open up a group home, and then the neighborhood would complain because then all of a sudden you'd have all these people, and it wasn't really a group home. It was saying that it was, but it really wasn't. They have to go through planning now to be approved. That's eliminated a lot of the group homes. Also, I think the reduction in state funding has reduced some of those group homes. And then again, it's all about the whole effort of law enforcement, code enforcement, with all the special task force that law enforcement does, is finding those that say they're group homes or not. One of the biggest problems that's been being eliminated is they found what were called group homes, and you have 6 parolees living in a group home that's not a group home, and that's a violation of their parole. So it's really a collaborative effort between law enforcement and code enforcement, which has really led to a reduction in the number of group homes in residential neighborhoods.
I see. Okay.
It's probably semantics, but when you're talking about group homes, does it mean it's a licensed facility?
It has to be licensed through the city of Lancaster.
Okay.
And can be licensed through the city of Lancaster and the state.
Got it.
That's a licensed group home. If you're not licensed, then you either are just a rental, or you shouldn't be anything at all.
So I could buy a house, rent out rooms to my fellow commissioners, and be considered a group home if I got a license through Lancaster?
No, you'd all have to have a disability.
Okay.
And it would have to be defined what is a disability. If you don't have that disability, then it's a rental.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Liz, can you clarify, if they're licensed by the state, then they're not required to be licensed by the city of Lancaster, or is it a...
They don't have to pay the fee. They have to be licensed through the city of Lancaster, but they're exempt from paying the business license fee.
And does this 116 include board and care homes for the elderly or disabled? So that's part of the 116. Okay.
Okay.
Elizabeth, this is 6 or less? Is a group home?
Yes.
6 or less. It's not, okay.
It's the difference between disability versus
Right.
non-disability.
Right.
Because you can't violate state fair housing.
Right.
And that's where the confusion comes in.
Right. Okay.
Okay. It sounds like you're reasonably satisfied with the direction that's been taken in terms of group homes within the city of Lancaster. You wouldn't be looking to our board for any specific assistance in any area of this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, any other questions, comments?
Elizabeth, one thing I'm curious about. You mentioned elderly, disabled. A single-family residence that is running a so-called elderly care and hospice, that has to be licensed?
Well, hospice, it depends, and this would have to be, Brian Ludicky would have to explain that. There comes a point where it is no longer a group home. It's under what you're saying, hospice, convalescent,
And that's a different kind of a license, right?
Yes. They would just get an ordinary business license, but they would have to go through planning.
But they can do that within a single-family home in a normal residential neighborhood?
We haven't seen it in a single-family
Oh,
home.
I know of one.
Do you?
Yep.
Then you need to call it in,
I'll-
because we may not know.
I'll give you the address.
Yeah, that's always helpful.
Okay.
And that's another thing. We do real well with complaints. We can go out there on a complaint, and we can write up the other houses for what's wrong, and we can do a lot of investigation. But the best thing for us is when people call in complaints. It helps us immensely. It helps the neighbors. It helps us find out what's going on in the neighborhood, and then we're able to work with other agencies. We do work with the health department and all of that. We have a lot of hoarding and things that we work with them, and the elderly abuse. We run into that when we're doing inspections.
Okay. I'll email you a note with the address on it.
Cool.
Okay, if there's no further comments, again, Elizabeth, thank you very much for the presentation on that. Okay, unfortunately, I received a call from Emilio Salas about 2 hours ago. He's not going to be able to attend today's meeting on items number 3, 4, and 5. So I'm going to recommend that those items be postponed to the next meeting. I know there was a speaker for all 3 of those items. I will ask that speaker if he would like to postpone his comments until the meeting in July.
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next item is a quarterly update report from the LNVC subcommittee concerning State SB 660 legislation pertaining to suspending voucher payment assistance for issues involving truancy. Commissioner Stoltz and Moulton?
It died in committee.
Oh, okay.
It didn't get out of the committee. So I don't know that it'll come back, but it did die in committee.
Okay.
Okay.
We've disbanded now.
Okay, I'll note the demise of the LNVC subcommittee. Okay, next item on the agenda, we had a very good presentation by City... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, yes.
Number 6? Yeah. And what is it involved? I need to know, a little briefing on it.
I'm sorry?
I need like a little briefing on it, so I have this go up there. What is it about?
There was proposed legislation before the state of California about legislation pertaining to suspending voucher payments, assistance for issues involving tenancy.
Truancy?
Truancy, yes.
Truancy for like minors that don't go to school?
You're right. But
So what is the voucher program?
But as Commissioner Moulton just pointed out, that measure has died in committee and is not moving forward.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next item is the appointment of 2 members of the commission to assist city staff in the evaluation of the Unite applications. City staff presented a report to us about the Unite program, and this year's we're being asked to provide once again 2 members to serve on the selection committee. And Commissioner Moulton wants to re-up for another year on that. Thank you.
I'd be happy to participate in that as well.
Okay, it's always goes through the fastest. So Commissioner Moulton and Commissioner Derryberry would like to serve. Let's make this official, and I'll make that motion that they be our nominees to that board.
I'll second it.
Please vote. Motion carries unanimously. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner. Let's see. The motion carried 6-0 with 1 abstention. Yeah.
Go for yourself.
Yeah, I am. I wanted to abstain since I nominated, well, since I wanted to do it myself. So.
Oh, okay. Let's. Okay, we'll try this again. Please vote. I was looking at. Okay, the motion carries 5 in favor and 2 abstentions, no opposed. We'll expect a full-blown, detailed report. We did have a speaker on this item.
Yeah, I want to know what Unite stands for.
Oh, boy.
Unite applications. What does that stand for?
Let's see if I have that.
It's unifying neighborhoods in a team effort.
A team effort, and what is it for exactly, though?
The Unite program is a offshoot of the Stronger, Safer Neighborhoods, and the intent was to, in prior years, the city had conducted Looking Good Lancaster programs where volunteers participated in the cleanup of certain areas of town, and with the city of Lancaster being the primary on that effort, organizing it and sponsoring it and selecting sites.
But what's their main goal?
Let me get to that. With Unite, and where that differs is the mission was to empower neighborhoods to come up with their own ideas and to work, and that the city would be a networking resource to put these neighborhoods and the projects that they chose to do in connection with agencies within the city, within the county, with commercial properties that had the same vested interests to create that nexus.
What interest is it, though?
Improving their neighborhood.
Like the grass or the trees or...
A very good example was in the Trend neighborhood, there was a community garden developed there.
Uh-huh.
And we've had several others.
So just general, like, maintenance of people's...
Well, the idea is bring communities together on a common goal for a common purpose that serves the community well.
Clean up, stuff like that. Okay.
Looking for volunteers?
Volunteers? I wouldn't be opposed to that. I wouldn't,
What's your name?
David Grajeda.
The deadline for applications is rapidly approaching, and this information I know is on the city's website.
Okay. And where are the applications at? Right here at the front?
Pardon me?
Are there applications in the front?
There's some cards in the front. There's purple, it's a purple card, and it has a website and all the information you need on it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the last item on the agenda is the every month brief discussion of next month's possible agenda topics. Do you wish to speak to this issue?
What are the agenda topics?
That's what we're about to discuss.
Okay, can you guys discuss them first?
Sure.
Speak on the issues after? Thank you.
Okay, I'll entertain thoughts and comments from fellow commissioners first.
Tim, as far as you know, we're going to have LA County representation at the next meeting?
Yes, Mr. Salas indicated that unfortunately an emergency had developed this afternoon, that he could not make it up here for today's meeting, and apologized and said he would be here at the meeting in July.
So my only request is that we continue to look at the fair market rents, because I think that's a big issue that we'd still like to
Yeah, I spoke with him briefly, and he fully intends bringing that item with a novel approach that he'd like to present to us.
And also number 4, is he going to carry that over and just... I'm sorry, is he going to carry that over also?
Yes, I mentioned to him that we will carry over items 3, 4, and 5, since he wasn't here to discuss any of those. Elizabeth, one possible item Sherry had mentioned to me, and unfortunately she's not able to attend today's meeting. At the Antelope Valley Poppy Festival, cards were passed out to citizens, and perhaps some of those citizens indicated topics they would like to see the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission discuss. And we weren't sure whether any of those cards did indicate any of the public interest on that. She suggested that I talk to you about possibly having that as an agenda item for July.
Okay, I'll find out where the cards are. Or do you know where the cards are?
No, I do
Okay,
not.
I'll work on it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay. Commissioner Banks and Moulton, it'll be 3 months since we've last heard from the tutoring subcommittee. Do you think it's a good time to bring that?
Put it on the agenda, please.
All right. Okay, and again, if anybody has any other thoughts that develop in the next couple weeks. I know you all have my email. Be sure to suggest, and I'll see that those matters are on the next agenda. Okay. Oh, okay. I think it's appropriate. I was just about to close the meeting. We'll now hear from the...
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. We have a speaker on this matter?
Well, so this would be the time to address any, like...
Oh, that'll be in just a couple minutes.
Okay, no, I'm talking about for the next meeting to discuss.
Oh, yeah, if you're...
Like an item, like an idea?
Sure.
Pretty much. Well, I like talking about code, so, you know, anything with code matters, like code enforcement, why do we have a lot more code officers, and why, you know, I like to talk about that kind of stuff, and how you guys, what happens if people don't pay their tickets, you know, like say if they don't agree with a certain fine, you know, and they decide not to pay it, like what are the steps, you know, after that? What if they just totally decide not to pay any fines, tickets the city gives them because they don't agree with it, maybe because that they just don't want to pay and they can't afford it? I want to know the steps that afterwards, you know, I want to know what they do, what the city does to the citizen that chooses not to cooperate, and in that kind of, you know, any code violations I like to talk about. So, you know, anything that has to deal with the code, I would love to hear about it next week, or next meeting, excuse me. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mark,
To the gentleman's comment first, I would suggest he might want to call staff and he can get the answer to all of those questions if he wants to not have to wait a month to find out.
I'd rather address
Just offering it up.
Thank you.
The second thing, we will be, the joint Antonovich breakfast will be June 22nd with City Council. One of the subjects will be the Housing Authority will be there to give a status report, so you might want to have someone there. Sherry is going to talk to you on that. The third, I believe the reason the gentleman's not here, there was a suit filed today in downtown Los Angeles against the county, Lancaster, and Palmdale for alleged discrimination in the Section 8 program. They're alleging overzealous, well, I won't put words in their mouth. The way I saw it was overzealous and discriminatory enforcement, which we obviously, Lancaster, Palmdale, and the county would disagree with vehemently. So that was just filed today, and I'm assuming that's where the county folks are dealing with.
okay, thank you. Okay, the last item is public business from the floor. Okay, thank you. We request any person who would like to address the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission on non-agendized matters to complete a speaker card, and you will find speaker cards on the back table of the council chambers. Additionally, we respectfully request that you fill the cards out completely and print as clearly as possible so that, if necessary, the commission or city staff will be able to contact you either by phone or mail. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. When you approach the podium, please notice there are 3 lights. The green light comes on when you begin, the yellow light will come on when you have 30 seconds remaining, and the red light will come on when your 3 minutes are up. We ask that you be considerate of the allotted time to allow other speakers to have their 3 minutes as well. Following this procedure will allow for a smooth and timely process for the commission meeting, and we appreciate your cooperation. State law prohibits the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission from taking action on items not on the agenda, and your matter will be referred to staff. Do we have any speakers on this item?
No.
Okay.
Would you allow me to speak? Privilege.
Okay, if there's no other comments of the commission, I'm going to go ahead and close today's meeting at 5:01.